I'm here from the Delaware Valley Regional Planning Commission. I'll talk more about that in just a sec. To talk about a project that we did on behalf of SEPTA, which is the Southeastern Transportation Authority for the Pennsylvania side of the Philadelphia region. And the nature of this project is a little different, right? And Matt Gates mentioned it from DVRPC a little bit yesterday about how the nature of some of our deliverables are changing. It's not just, forecasted riderships or volumes in the future based on some change. So this project is a little unique, and I think it might be one of the first, if not the first, travel demand forecasting projects that we've done that really focused on equity. And I'm going to talk all about it here. Here we go. Okay, so I know Matt had some of this information yesterday. I usually start with this for the national conference because we're called the Delaware Valley Regional Planning Commission, the MPO for Philadelphia. Oftentimes I get asked, oh, do you live in Philadelphia, or do you live in Delaware, or you work in Delaware? No, it's just the Delaware Valley, which was carved out through time with the help of the Delaware River, which bisects or the border between Pennsylvania and New Jersey. We were established in 1965. We have about 110 plus or minus full-time staff. 2 states, Pennsylvania and New Jersey. Although we saw yesterday that our extended model goes out into Maryland and portions of Delaware and up into central New Jersey and eastern Pennsylvania. Our region covers 9 counties. We have 352 municipalities, almost 4,000 square miles, and about 5.7 million people. So I'm going to focus today on SEPTA's regional rail. SEPTA has other modes. There's bus, trolley, there's streetcars, and the subways. But for this particular project, I'm really focusing on and going to talk about the regional rail. And on the left or the right-hand side of the slide there, you see the extent of the network in red. There's 13 lines, about 155 stations, and pre-COVID in 2019, we had 132,000 riders. That's dipped significantly since the numbers are rebounding, but we're still well below those 2019 numbers. About 34 million annual riders in 2019, 280 miles of track, so it's pretty extensive. It goes up into New Jersey, Trenton area there on the northeast side, and then on the southwest into Delaware. Max speed of 55 miles per hour, so it's not a particularly fast service, and with a 20.5 average speed. And at the stations, there's roughly or approximately 25,000, almost 26,000 parking spaces. Okay, so why are we doing this project? Why was DVRPC asked by SEPTA to do this? Well, there's a significant need for change on the regional rail. I'm going to talk about some of the issues that they've had or experiencing now. The regional rail almost functions as a separate entity from the rest of SEPTA. It is primarily, exclusively focused on commuters. You have good service inbound in the morning, orientated towards Center City, Philadelphia, and in the afternoon it's the reverse. Primarily the express trains and are focused getting folks out of the city in the afternoon. So that leaves a pretty big gap during the day where the average headways and frequencies are hourly, like 45 minutes hourly. So if you have some type of non-traditional work schedule, in Center City, Philadelphia, there's universities, there's hospitals, those folks, it's really difficult for them to use the regional rail because of this this mismatch between what the jobs that are housed in Center City and what their service is focused on. And you can see less than 1% of all SEPTA trips involved a transfer for regional rail. So folks are using regional rail and only regional rail, and most of them are just using it for commuting purposes for work. You can see the graphic on the right there. This is a service pattern, an inbound service pattern for one particular day. Now, the names of the stations at the top are irrelevant. So, but what you can see is every color represents a different service pattern for one day. So you could be riding SEPTA half your life and still like not know, which train you need to take. Does it stop where I need to go? Does it skip my stop? So this is also part of the issue. There's a lack of connectivity for reverse commuters, which I was mentioning about the lack of service during the midday and off-peak periods. The fare structure is also pretty complex. If you were to ask me, well, how much does it cost to ride SEPTA? I would have to say, well, it depends how far you're going. It depends how many zones you're going. It depends on what time of the day it is. Is it peak or off-peak? Depends on what day it is. Is it a weekday or a weekend? Depends on how you pay. If you have a cash fare or you have a SEPTA key card, or if you buy a ticket at the station, and it all adds up to a very complex and confusing fare system. Also, the regional rail consumes a lot of SEPTA's operating expense. So it carries about 12% of the riders, but eats up about 28% of all operating expenses. So it's by far the most expensive system to maintain. And not only that, pre-COVID, they were focusing on closing stations. Like, well, it's a way to save money. And if there's it's like a chicken and an egg, right? You have a station with low ridership, and then they cut service, and then it falls even more. There's even fewer riders, and then they say, well, no one's using it. Let's just close it, right? And unfortunately, a lot of those stations that they closed were in the city, low-income areas, which were for some folks, their only way to get in. So this is kind of what transpired in a new vision from SEPTA, a different way of looking at the regional rail system. Okay, so this system is more going to be focused on a lifestyle rather than just focused on the commuter. They want to operate more frequently in both directions, better connections to the local transit system, integrated fares, and a much more simplified fare structure. And also accessible, right? You can see on the picture there, that is most of the stations, a lot of the stations at the regional rail are not handicap accessible. There's no like level boardings. And even for someone who's elderly or maybe has a broken ankle or something, they literally need help getting onto the train. And down at the picture down here, like some of the stations have very few amenities, very few. There's no ticket booth. There's no, some of them don't even have anywhere to sit. So this is a whole new way of kind of like looking at the regional rail system with a focus on low-income riders, as we'll get into in a few minutes. And I mentioned the simplified fare zones and scheduling. In the past year or so, 18 months, SEPTA has done a significant public outreach effort, online surveys. They've had public meetings to gather a lot of information about what's missing with the regional rail system. So they're really committed to making a change. So for this, we actually modeled 3 scenarios. I'm going to talk about them in a few minutes. But this was just some of the things that were common to all 3 of the scenarios that we did. There will be free transfers from the regional rail. If you have a regional rail ticket, you can transfer for free to another mode. And if you're traveling, if you're transferring onto the regional rail system, you would only have to pay the fare difference from what you've already paid. The parking costs are changing significantly. So this within the city of Philadelphia, it's $5 a day. That's more than double what it is now, but that's to disincentivize folks from driving most of the way into the city and then getting on the train as you're getting into the city. And outside it would be $2.50. Just about 1/3 of the stations on the regional system are within the city of Philadelphia. And then the simplified for scenarios 1 and 2, there was a simplified fare zones from 4 to 3, and generally lower fares for the city and, inner suburbs. Okay, so the 3 model scenarios that we did, the first one was called the regional coverage, where we did 30-minute headways on all lines all day. So that's a fairly significant increase, especially off peak, where we typically had 60-minute headways. We went down to 30. The metro frequency was called scenario 2, where we had 15-minute headways in the central core and 30 and 60 minutes in the more suburban areas. And the all-day speed, which was kind of a blended version with Amtrak. So Amtrak runs along several of the lines of our regional rail system, and there's overlapping and duplicative service. So they want to much better coordinate with Amtrak to kind of eliminate some of the redundant service and make the fare payments simpler. Okay, so this is kind of the scenario 1 graphic here. So there's just the whole system is boiled down into 3 zones, and the fares over here $2, $4, and $6. So within the central core there, it's only $2 to ride the system. And then for the metro frequency, they actually combined 1 and 2. So the zones for 1 and 2 are just the $2, which has a we'll see a significant impact on the results for sure. And then outside of zone 3 is $6. And then scenario 3 was the blended service with Amtrak. They still have like zone 4 and zone 5, but those are pretty far out. And that's because of the regional Amtrak service it goes all the way up to New York and down to Wilmington and Baltimore and so on. So that's the reason why they had those zones there. All the way up to zone 5 would be $10. Okay, so now I'm going to walk you through the modeling process that we use to do this. This is just kind of the bullet points, and then I'll go into some of these in a little more detail. So we started with the 2045 no build, our Vizoom model in Vizoom 18. We imported the GTFS from SEPTA. Those typically need a little scrubbing before we can put them in. There's the mismatching stations and so on, and so it's a little bit of a work up front, but it would certainly easier than coding it all ourselves. But it we did need some help with that, getting that up and running. Then we had 3 models, 3 scenarios, and we coded the changes for each of those. We made some changes to the project directory. When our model runs, it collects a lot of transit data, which is then like deleted because it's just, it takes up a lot of space and a lot of computation time for the model. So we wanted to go in and make sure that it's actually saved the data that we were looking for, which I'll talk about in a few minutes. We ran the model, we set up a filter. We wanted all of the trips starting from home. And then we reran in the time block assignments. Our model is basically 4 time blocks, AM, PM, midday, and a nighttime. And then we set up some flow bundles so we could actually capture and store all of the trips that we were looking for, those home trips that used regional rail. So this created a lot of path lags for the actual transit paths themselves, all the individual trips. And for that, we incorporated some database folks that helped us. And we did this in GitHub. So we had all of those large ATT files that were output of the model, and we brought them into this interface, and with some Python scripting, we were able to process and summarize and tabulate all of the information that we were looking for. And then getting to the more of the equity stuff, we were joined that data from the home TAZ with some CTPP data, some demographic data, which I'll mention in a couple minutes. And then lastly, we've presented the initial results. Okay, just a little background on DVRPC's regional model. It's fairly robust. It's a quite large model for, I guess in the United States, it might be one of the largest. Got 3,400 zones, 219,000 nodes, and so on. Importantly, we have 12,000 transit stops and 6,000 transit service patterns. So one full model run typically takes about 18 hours to do. Okay, so a little more detail about how we did our modeling process. Once we got started with our 2045 model, got the GTFS all squared away, we coded changes to the network. So that included the different headways and service patterns for the 3 scenarios. And we made changes to the project directory, which I just mentioned, because we wanted to get the output so that those files weren't deleted. We wanted to make sure that we kept that information without having it deleted. And then we ran the models. Then we also loaded a custom procedure file. So what this did was to capture those particular trips, right? That were started from home, that used any portion of the trip that had one of the links as a regional rail. That makes sense. So it could be, didn't have to, as long as it originated from home and some portion of the path used the regional rail, that's the trips that we were looking for. So we set up a filter to do that. And then we reran the assignment for the time blocks. We also set up the flow bundle for the purposes that I just mentioned. So the output of all those flow bundles, those path legs, that's where we brought into the GitHub interface, and we were able to summarize and tabulate all that data, starting at the TAZs, and all of those trips were weighted for an average of trip length and trip cost, and we have some summary information which I'll share with you in a minute. And then it was also joined demographic data. So this was probably the most important thing that SEPTA was looking for. We joined it with the poverty status, minority status, 0-car households, and non-English speaking households. So this is some of the initial results that we got in terms of average fare paid in low-income TAZs, right? You can see in 2019, the average fare for those TAZs was over $4. But since we've, under the different scenarios that kind of, relooked at the fare zones, especially in the inner ring and in the city, and lowering those the fares, we see a significant reduction in the cost for folks of low income. Some of the other demographic information, the non-white fares, the non-English fares, non-motorized fares, and below poverty fare, all of them show significant reduction in cost from the 2019 existing conditions. And this is just a system-wide kind of what we can expect. So this actually compares 2045 no build with the 3 scenarios. And scenario 2 has got the highest ridership, about almost 130% increase from the no build. But again, that's factoring in better service and lowering the cost for a lot of folks who are potential riders. And this is just tabulation, kind of reiterating the same thing here across the day of the different time blocks. So graphically, we can see, so this is the results of scenario 1, and the concentration of Center City in the center of the graphic there. So this was with the 30-minute headways, and you can see the increase, the general increase of riders concentrated in the urban core and along the media L1 line there. So kind of and out towards the outer, we don't see a lot of change. For scenario 2 is pretty similar. This was the one that had the highest ridership of all 3 of our scenarios. Again, you kind of see the recurring pattern here of the highest increase in ridership at the stations are concentrated along in the center city area and the urban core. And then lastly, scenario 3 didn't quite get the same amount of increase as the other 2 scenarios. This was with the blend-in service from Amtrak, which is, probably focuses more on the suburban commuter than folks in the city. But still, that's something that we were asked to take a look at. So in summary, the analysis found a substantial benefit for low-income and minority riders in all 3 scenarios. So nearly all of the riders saw a reduction in travel time, and most stations saw gains in riderships except for where there were park and ride. Some of the outer stations, remember I mentioned, they were increasing the parking fee, which did deter some folks from using those particular stations. So this is actually just hot off the press. We just finished this work last month, and we've delivered our initial memo to SEPTA for their review. And they're going to take a look at those 3 scenarios and get back to us. I think the most likely path forward is they're going to kind of cherry pick some of the things that they see the most benefit from, whether it being scenario 1, 2, or 3. And likely this will lead to another iteration or more scenarios. There's also I did an initiative to overhaul the bus system, and we might have a scenario where we also, take the preferred alternative from the regional rail and blend it with some improvements on the bus, because there's a lot of overlapping service. And like I mentioned, the fares structure and everything. You have a bus crowded, full of people heading into the city, running along a parallel, the train with, half empty train, but because it's just mainly due to the cost. So there's going to be some more follow up to this, but this is where we stand right now, and that's all I have.